Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and today I've got Bryan Hannegan back on the podcast. Bryan is the CEO and president and CEO of Holy Cross Energy in Colorado. He was on the podcast in August of 2021. Bryan, it's been 5 years. The name of that podcast, or the title, was Creating the Utility of the Future. You've been there for about 8 or 9 years. I'd say you're well along the path in creating the utility of the future. Thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you, Ted, for having me back. It's a special honor. I know not everybody gets a second bite at the apple. So we can evaluate what was said and talked about in 21 and see how well we're doing.
You know, our friend Jigger Shaw said, "Oh, Ted, the only reason that you get me back is because I'm not very articulate. And so I need to come back on to try to explain again and redeem myself." I said, that is the farthest thing from the truth. Anyway, it's great to have you. And it was in March of this year that Holy Cross hit this incredible milestone of being 100% clean energy. So congratulations on that. And talk about what that means. Does that mean 24/7 clean energy, or what does that mean?
It's a intermediate step on our journey to our goal of 100% clean energy in every hour, every day by 2030. And it's a really ambitious goal. I think we're only one of a handful of utilities in the country that have set that goal over the next 4 or 5 years from now. What happened in March is that we were able to procure a equal amount of renewable energy over the course of the month of March to meet the amount demanded by our roughly 60,000 delivery points, our 47,000 members here in Western Colorado. For us, it's more than just purchasing power and having too much in some hours and not enough in others. It's really trying to work with our projects that we have under contract and our wholesale partners, the Energy Authority and Xcel Energy that represent us in the market, to try to match our supply of renewables to our demand for electricity in every hour as nearly as possible. And one of the things that I really like about the March goal is that of that 100% kind of averaged over the month, 60% of that power was time matched, meaning we generated it in the hour in which it was consumed. Mm-hmm. And that means that we're getting much more accurate and granular in getting closer to 100% every hour, which is our goal. So yeah, it's an intermediate milestone. It's a little bit like hitting a flat spot on the trail on the head up to the summit. And we can catch our breath, look around and admire the view. But then when you look up, you see, oh my gosh, I got a steep vertical face taking me to the summit, and I got to buckle up and climb some more.
Yeah. So now, what were the factors? I presume you had relatively mild weather conditions that caused less space heating. Talk to me about the factors that made that possible for that month.
Yeah, at Holy Cross, our primary demand for electricity happens in the winter months. We're in the mountains of Western Colorado. We have wonderful, beautiful ski resorts and towns that support them that peak right around Christmas and New Year's. Mm-hmm. The springtime is the time that is a time of rest. It's in between the summer months with the hiking and the rafting and all the good outdoor activities in the warm weather, and the wintertime and the skiing and the snowboarding and all the après that comes with that in the wintertime. So our demand naturally hits an ebb, about 100 megawatts of peak demand on the system compared to 300 megawatts during the winter months. But the month of March was also really sunny. The winds were good and constant on the eastern plains of Colorado, where we have our big wind farm that supports about a third of our electricity supply. So our solar was cranking, our wind was cranking, the demand wasn't that great, and it made it really easy for us to true up the supply with the demand, primarily from renewables with a little bit of backup from the grid.
Mm-hmm. And then in April, I think by the same measurement, you hit 90% of that target.
That's right. We're actually average through the first 4 months of the year, we're at 92% year to date. And basically the last 4 months of the year will look like the first 4 months of the year in terms of our seasonal cycle. And we're hopeful that with the production profiles of our projects, primarily wind, solar, battery storage, and hydroelectric, although the hydro is a little bit challenged this summer with the drought and the low water flows, we're hopeful that we will end the year for the entire year above 90%, which itself will also be another important milestone on our journey to 100%.
Couple questions. Are RECs involved in this, the purchase of renewable energy certificates? Is that part of your renewable supply?
Yes, every renewable energy project, when it generates a megawatt hour of electricity, it generates a REC, and that certificate is sort of the license that says this power was created by this plant in this location. And so we use RECs to account for where we get the power. As I mentioned, about 60% of our power supply in March, and the number fluctuates from one month to the next, but about that amount every month, comes from projects that are directly contracted to Holy Cross. They were built for Holy Cross.
Mm-hmm.
They serve Holy Cross directly. We have the transmission arrangements in our name to get the power from where those projects are generating it to the areas where we take it and distribute it to our member owners. So those are about as clean a shot as one can get,
right,
in terms of having additionality and environmental integrity. The other 40% comes from market purchases, where we're not just buying whatever power and then slapping a renewable energy certificate from another week or another month onto it. We're actually in the market contemporaneously looking for bundled purchases, where we're getting the energy and the REC associated with it at the same time, to the extent that that's possible. Market rules, I think, need to continue to evolve to allow for that kind of accounting on a more granular basis, and that's something that we're certainly advocating for when we speak with our partners and our counterparties.
Yeah. Now your goal, 100 by 30, which I think is 100% by 2030.
That's right.
Would that be 100% that's directly under contract with you, or would that still be a mix of directly contract, like you call it, the clean shot, with the wholesale with the spot market purchases? Or what's the definition of your goal for 2030?
So it's at minimum the ability to source 100% renewables in every hour from a mix of projects dedicated to Holy Cross and spot market purchases that we can trace back to a project in a particular hour at a particular time. The market opportunities for renewables, particularly in the West, are great right now. There are a lot of companies, P&M, Public Service in New Mexico, the California ISO, Pacific Core. They're all investing, even Xcel Energy in Colorado, they're all investing in a lot of wind, a lot of solar, a lot of storage in response to those state mandates, so that during the hours, the daytime hours when the sun is shining, we are awash in solar energy, and you see prices on the power market that are, if not near zero, they might even be at zero or below zero, which is an incredible time to load up on energy at low cost from a clean energy resource. To meet our 100% goal, we're going to have to store that energy for some period of time and redispatch it onto our system in the overnight hours, or when demand spikes between typically 4 and 8 p.m. So demand flexibility is going to be a huge part of us closing the gap from the 92% where we are today to the 100%. We probably won't source 100% from directly contracted projects, simply because the project prices right now, given all of the hiccups in supply chains and materials and inflation and so on, it's actually more affordable for our members to go and get clean power from the markets, provided that we can get it with this sort of ownership chain that allows us to verify its renewable basis. When you look at compliance with renewable portfolio standards, or for example, in Colorado, the Clean Energy Plan legislation, those measures are inclusive of both directly contracted plants and market purchases. And so that at minimum is what we're trying to accomplish. If we can get more granular than that, we will do it. In fact, we're starting to report now monthly average renewables, the 100%, but also what are the time matched renewables, that 60% that lands in the hour where it's being consumed.
Yeah, it's so cool. Paint a picture for our listeners about what the future might look like, the future of the grid, and this not your grid, but maybe even nationally. I often think about, and if it's 100% renewables, you've got hydro that you can you can dump the water when you need it. You've got continental wind, which usually blows in the morning and in the evening, or coastal wind. You've got offshore wind, it blows all the time. Isn't that where the sort of the stacking of renewables is going, to kind of conceptually look at how you can use, I mean, solar obviously is during the day, wind at night. Isn't that sort of where we're headed as a utility industry?
I think so. If you look at the utilities that have high renewable energy contents, most of them have a large quantity of hydroelectric power. I think at one point yesterday, I was looking at a data portal that I have on my startup screen, and there were probably 30 countries somewhere in the world that were operating north of 90% renewables,
Like Paraguay and Costa Rica and
yeah,
Norway,
and,
with a lot of hydro.
a lot of hydro, and they're just opening and closing the gates to meter the flow of hydro across the turbine. I mean, it takes work, it takes smarts, but it's relatively simple because you're still dispatching the amount of supply of energy, and you're kind of letting the demand on the consumer side be whatever it is. The same is true if you're Iceland and you have geothermal or other dispatchable technologies. And I think that's where we're going to need to really focus our efforts, is in getting some of that dispatchability, because the wind shows up when it shows up. The solar shows up when the clouds aren't hanging over yet, right? There's a lot of inherent variability in those resources that, while you can predict it, you can't really dispatch it and control it the same way that you can other renewables. So we actually have to focus, as I mentioned a moment ago, on how do we encourage people to use more energy when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing? In fact, Ted, we already have today many hours over the course of a month where we have more wind and more solar supply than we have demand for electricity on the Holy Cross grid, where we're actually selling our excess wind or solar to somebody else. We'd love to be able to store that, save it for later, and use more of our own supply to fill in those gaps when the clouds move over the solar panels, or the winds aren't gusting quite as much around the wind turbine, and so the production declines. We want to be able to smooth that out, and there are a lot of different ways to do that. I mentioned battery storage, I mentioned demand response. Just having your resources in different locations. Our solar is here in the mountains, but we also have solar in the eastern plains of Colorado. We have wind on the eastern plains of Colorado. Our hydros are all throughout our service territory, but also as far west as Grand Junction, an hour and a half to the west of us. That resource diversity allows you to make sure that you have something going at all given times. And where we end up finding ourselves now is we are an orchestrator of all of these different supplies and their capabilities in any given hour that we can't control, but we can maybe predict with a little bit of success. And then we're also orchestrating all 60,000 meters, all the folks, the buildings and the homes that are connected to those. And we're trying to influence how they use their demands for energy services in such a way that they can maximize the use of the renewables that we're bringing onto the system. And in there, you've got batteries, and in there, you've got other forms of storage. And somewhere in there, there's a pony, right? On any given hour, we'll be able to make supply match demand, because if we don't do that as a utility, somebody's out of power somewhere, and that's not a good thing.
When we spoke 5 years ago, and I was asking you about your vision, one of your visions was, I think, a network of interconnected microgrids. But what you're just saying, what you've just been saying the past few minutes is making a case for transmission, right? That we really want to be able to access resources that are not particularly proximate to us, because we want them to be in different climate zones or in different weather patterns, I guess.
That's true. And a lot of the large scale grid integration studies from places like the National Lab of the Rockies or other groups really do speak to the value of transmission in a large sense. I'm a big believer in using a full portfolio of tools. Those transmission scale, utility scale tools, we have a 200 megawatt wind farm, we have a share of a 75 megawatt solar farm, but we also have a lot of individual rooftops with 5, 10 solar panels at tops. We've got a battery in a few garages on the wheels of an electric vehicle that we can utilize for battery storage, as well as the large scale batteries we have adjacent to the solar farms that are connected directly to our distribution network, which are in our communities. I still very much believe in the notion of a set of networked microgrids, and I'll go one step further than what I did in 2021. I'll assert that every home and every building will probably end up being a microgrid of its own someday. And for us, it'll happen sooner rather than later because of risks from wildfire and cybersecurity and just the failure of aging infrastructure, where our homeowners, our building owners are increasingly looking to have a plan B in the event that our plan A of supporting them by the utility grid isn't available to them. The end of the month, we'll be announcing a microgrid project at the Aspen Airport here in Colorado, which we serve, a partnership with Pitkin County, where the necessity of this project came from the 2018 Lake Christine wildfire that nearly cut our transmission lines up to the Aspen area from the rest of our network. And the county authorities were aghast when they realized that they wouldn't have telecommunications, the airport couldn't operate, no one could pump gas, the water couldn't be treated because nobody had any power. So we said, well, how do we take the critical infrastructures and develop this plan B using a Holy Cross solar farm, a Pitkin County battery, and some smarts on the grid to allow a little microgrid to operate under a black sky scenario where the transmission wasn't available. I think we're going to see more and more of those within our communities. And I think being intentional about that resilience by design is a really smart play in a world where we've got more climate variability and we've got more risks to normal operations of the utility grid.
Yeah, I like the way you're calling it a plan B. And here I am in Glendale, California, where just 5 or 6 miles from here, 12,000 homes burned down last January. And most people didn't have a plan B, of course. They were just out of luck. Let's talk, so many things came up here. I want to talk about the resources that Holy Cross under your leadership has purchased. I know you've got a share of 200 megawatt, what is it, the Bronco Plains wind farm, a share of the 75 megawatt Hunter solar array. What are the other big projects that you have in your mix?
We've got 3 solar plus storage hybrid plants located directly in our service territory in different parts of our distribution system. We've got one at the Colorado Mountain College campus here in Glenwood Springs. That's about 5 megawatts of solar sitting alongside 15 megawatt hours of battery capability. It's at a local, early stage college, community college, you would call it in California. It's part of our college system. It's a residential campus. It's a great location to be potentially a place of refuge if we need to evacuate folks in the event of a wildfire. We've partnered with the university there and their sustainability program to develop some interesting training programs for future electric utility employees working with new technologies. So that's one of the projects. And then we've got 2 other projects that are roughly similar, Mam Creek and High Mesa projects, we call them. One is in Rifle, Colorado. The other is in Parachute, Colorado, between Grand Junction and Glenwood Springs on the I-70 corridor. Those are both 10 megawatts of solar capacity combined with 20 megawatt hours of batteries. And again, those are great because the batteries allow us to some extent, manage the flow of solar electricity from those plants onto the grid so that we can better match up the supply of renewables with the demand for electricity for the folks that are in that portion of our service territory. Eventually, those will become the anchors, along with the CMC project. Those will become the anchors of our ability to operate our distribution system in pieces rather than as a whole in the event that we need to, as you have in California, de-energize certain areas of our system because of the high wildfire risk on the day. And we've just developed our own PSPS protocol, four-letter word in the utility industry, public
Sure
safety
is.
power shutoffs,
Yeah.
where we're looking at the weather, we're managing our system operations, we're doing all the right things to manage wildfire risk in the beginning, from operations and maintenance and predictive maintenance and vegetation management. But we're also monitoring the weather, the fire conditions, the soil moisture, and we're setting our system protection settings and potentially de-energizing line if it's simply unsafe to operate the system in certain areas. And we want to be able to operate the rest of it to the extent that we can with these local resources.
How much distributed solar is there? In other words, on consumers, or you call members, own rooftops, whether they're homes or businesses, and how much storage is there in your system?
That's a great question, Ted. We are rapidly approaching about 30 megawatts of nameplate behind the meter solar capacity. That combines both residential and commercial, but the large majority of that is coming from residential. In Colorado, we have full retail net metering, so that makes it a very attractive proposition for those that are putting solar on their rooftops. We have added on an incentive program we call Power Plus Flex, where we're encouraging those members who do purchase batteries along with their solar farm on their roof to put that battery into the service of the grid, allow us to charge it up with extra renewables when we have it and to draw it down when we're short renewable supply. In exchange, we basically make a capacity payment to our member owner instead of making the capacity payment to a market for that resource adequacy service. It actually makes the storage investment pencil out. It's about a little over $10 per kilowatt month bill credit that goes to a consumer. So if you have a 5 kilowatt battery and you let us use it, that's $50 a month that you get off your utility.
And then you have it for your own use if the grid goes down, right?
Yeah,
so
and
it's a tremendous resiliency benefit as well.
You have it first and foremost for your own use, for your own microgrid at your home. But then on the blue sky days where you don't need it, if we need it to shave our peak or fill in some valleys because we have the wind die down for an hour or two, this just distributed storage becomes really powerful. And I think at last look, nearly half of the new solar systems coming onto our grid are coming with storage.
That's great. And you and I have been in this industry for a long time, and we've been plagued by the notion of lost revenues and utilities saying, oh my God, we can't do energy efficiency because we'll lose revenues, or we can't allow customers to generate their own. And what's your response to that?
It depends on where you sit. The business model for an electric cooperative and frankly for a municipal utility is one that is a not-for-profit. And so we're really looking to be very efficient with the revenues that we do get in the door. And while I think we have to always make sure that we have enough revenue to provide the electric service that we're commissioned to do, we're also looking for a way to keep bills affordable. Ultimately, that means using our infrastructure optimally, not building any more than you absolutely have to in order to serve, but also making sure you're ensuring resource adequacy, reliability, and all the things. We're proud of the fact that our rates are among some of the lowest in Colorado, and they're a good 40-50% less than the national average at this point. Our transition to clean energy has actually helped us preserve affordability because we were able to take higher cost grid power from the wholesale market and replace it with lower cost renewables at the time that we were doing these projects in 2018, 2019, 2020. Others might not have that same luck right now based on market prices. And we understand that. So not everybody can do what we're doing. But as we look now at having a fixed cost, low cost power supply mix, we want to focus now on being very, very efficient in how we deliver that power to customers. And I think that's where we have some great opportunities with data analytics, with AI, with just process improvements to work on that component of the bill, which depending on who you are, can be anywhere from a third to a half of what you pay every month.
Gotcha. Couple quick, not necessarily in the proper sequence here, but I'm going to go for it anyway. You have a program called Pure, which is if one of your consumers wants to buy 100% solar or wind, they can pay a small premium. And I almost thought there was a typo on your website because the premium was like, for what in dollars, well, 300ths of a cent, or something like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
0.0000375 or something. Is that right?
It is. It hasn't always been that way though, Ted. When I first started, Holy Cross was around 35 to 40% renewables, and the added cost of going and procuring renewables in that very sort of nascent market,
Yeah.
mid 2010s, was a lot more. And I think we were looking at anywhere from a quarter cent to a full cent additional. We only apply that pure adder to the delta between our average renewables and 100%. So a few years ago, we would have 40% in the main. You would pay the extra quarter cent or a cent to get from 40 to 100. So it was a pretty significant part of the bill. It was a couple bucks here or there. Nowadays, given that we're clicking along at 92% and it's 0.3 of a cent, the adder to go from 92 to 100 is actually rather minuscule. And that's exactly what the program was intended to do. It was to allow our early adopters to put their money where their wishes were and give us the resources to get ahead of the game on what we would be doing with renewables. And as we've approached the 100% goal, that pure adder is going to go to zero and eventually go away because we'll all be at 100% anyway.
And so are you encouraging your members to go for it, to add
we absolutely are. I mean, every additional increment of demand for renewables helps us know that there's a desire amongst our membership to get more, to go faster, to do more. And those funds help us bridge the gap to projects that may just be a little bit out of the money. They might be worth doing. They might fit well in the portfolio, but they're a little bit outside of being truly cost effective, which it's a hard bar for us with as many good deals as we've been able to seek. But if our members say, no, I want you to go there, that's important to me and I'm willing to pay for it, well, then that gives our board the wherewithal to say yes when they might say no otherwise.
Yeah, you've done so many innovative things. The peak time payback. I know out here we have the emergency load reduction program, as much as $2 a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
to drop your load at the utility's most extreme periods. But that's a program that you have for not just commercial, but residential as well?
For residential as well, anyone can sign up for that peak time payback program and get a text message or an email the morning of an afternoon, let's say, where we know we're going to be hitting the coincident peak with the state's grid. The time at which the demand charges are going to hit us the most, where resource adequacy is going to be strained, and we will pay people several multiples of what they pay us for electricity to not use electricity. Interestingly enough, Ted, I see a day not too long from now where we will have the peak time payback concept, but for additional consumption during times where we have oversupply.
That's right.
Because it'll actually be more cost effective for us to pay people to use the renewables that we've already generated and paid for than for us to turn around and sell it into a market at a loss.
Well, I know Octopus Energy is offering free EV charging when the wind is blowing, right?
That's right.
I mean, pretty cool program.
I completely see that happening, particularly as we approach 100%. We're going to be plus or minus a couple percent all the time. And on those pluses, we want people to use it. And maybe if they've got a pre-cooled house, then when the renewables aren't there later in the afternoon, instead of turning the air conditioner back on, it's weird to talk about air conditioning in the mountains, but yes, we have it. Instead of turning it back on and adding to the peak, they've already pre-cooled the structure, and so they don't need to, and we get that peak relief.
Yeah. You have time of use rates. You have for a number of years, I believe. And now was it just a month ago or so that you added demand charges for even homeowners?
We did, yeah. We've had demand charges for our larger residential and commercial customers for as long as I've been here, at least 9 years now. But we did expand the demand charge at about $1 per kilowatt month in our most recent rate changes in April. That's really to send a signal to our consumers that using all of your electric demand at once really does add costs to the system. We're actively communicating through public events and newsletters all the time, this concept of staggering your electric use rather than stacking it all in 1 hour. Because when you do that, we have to build more infrastructure to serve that. And that infrastructure gets paid for by everybody in higher rates later on down the road. And so to try to allocate those costs a little bit more effectively, we introduced that demand charge. And, like any new concept, you get a little bit of grumbling. People understand why you're doing it. Maybe they don't like it, but it does provide an effective,
like you said, a signal.
Yeah,
it's a small charge. I mean, that compared to most demand charges that are out in the market, right?
And I think what that's done is it's gotten people to really think about, oh yeah, maybe I don't have to use everything at once, or yeah, I can use my stored energy in my battery at home, or I can sign up for a program to manage my peak demand, which, by the way, they can offset that demand charge by just participating in one of our peak time payback calls once in the month. They'll make more than enough back. So it's a great way to give people agency to manage their energy costs at a time where we're also frustrated that everything just seems to cost more.
Yeah. Last question, and you've alluded to a few things already, but you are creating the utility of the future, and congratulations on that. What are the next steps? You mentioned really trying to trim your delivery costs, but you've really worked hard on the power supply side of things. What else creates that utility of the future? Got the plan B as well.
Yeah, I think from a utility of the future standpoint, it's to continue to lean in on operating a more flexible and resilient electric grid that's ready for the challenges that we're going to face, whether or not it's operating with a highly renewable, highly variable power supply input, whether it's dealing with the resilience threats from things like wildfire and extreme weather, whether it's managing the challenges of things like cybersecurity, or equipment aging and failure. Just being nimble and flexible enough to stay true to our core purpose, which is to safely deliver reliable and affordable power that's increasingly sustainable. No one is going to care how clean the power is if it's not available to them, or if it starts wildfires, or if they can't pay for it, right? So we've got to do all of that. And I think that the heart of that is a modernized, flexible, very agile distribution system for electricity that envisions a world where every home, every building, every vehicle, every endpoint, frankly, is producing as well as consuming electricity. We got to kind of get our heads on for how it means, because we're going to be the only ones that will be able to orchestrate and manage all of that. And we've got to do that with reliability every hour of every day. And that means new skills, new tools, new data, new capabilities, new people. And that's really what I get excited about when I think about the years ahead.
You're just the right guy for the job, Bryan. Congratulations on your success to date. And as a member, I'm still a member of your utility. I thank you for that. And thanks for being on the podcast again. It's great to talk to you again.
Thank you, Ted. I love coming back. It's been a great honor, and hopefully we can do this again in a little while.
Will do. That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.